Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. My co-host for Canary Cry Radio and Canary Cry News Talk, Basil, goes on an annual trip every year. He travels and does things right around the new year, and so I was left to do Canary Cry News Talk on my own. And so what I wanted to do was kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, and publish the News Talk episode here with some visuals, nothing crazy. I'm not going to spend too much time editing the video together, but I'll play that for you in a moment. I do want to just mention briefly that I didn't discuss a couple different stories that should have been worth noting in the episode, although I only had a half an hour, so it's hard to get everything in. But the Russian plane that went down, very sad, and again, what's the motive here? Who benefits? It seems like there is perhaps some sort of covert attack on Russia from the DNC/Soros New World Order faction. I actually talk about false flag and what that actually means and how we ought to interpret that definition as Christians, and especially Christian truthers. But in particular with this story, it's very tragic, it's very sad, and I do think that they are just poking the bear, literally. They want Russia to basically be part of this war, World War III, and I think they're trying to provoke Putin to strike militarily on a larger scale. And again, we'll just have to see how it all plays out, but you know, it's just another one of those things, very tragic, very sad, that happened. Real lives are lost in this fight, and we just have to remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. All things I reiterate in this News Talk episode. So without further ado, let me just jump right into it. Canary Cry News Talk for December 27th, 2016, titled No More Fake News, No More Cash 2017. Check it out.
The world is getting crazier. People are acting more and more insane. The end of the world is tomorrow. There's only one thing to do when the world is falling apart. Listen to Basil and Gons as they discuss this week's news and events through the lens of Bible prophecy.
You are listening to Canary Cry News Talk.
Hey everybody, Gons here. Thanks for listening to Canary Cry News Talk. It is Monday, December 26th, 2017. Basil is on his annual voyage to wherever he goes annually on his voyage. I believe he is visiting some other parts of the flat plane globe, however you look at it. And so in the meantime, I was able to put together a machine that mimics Basil. And I call him Basilism. And I just want to test him before we get going here. Basilism, are you there?
You betcha, buddy.
Awesome. This is going to be fun. So, you know, I can interact with it, and it's got some things up its sleeve. So we'll see how it goes, but glad you can make it, Basilism.
You betcha, buddy.
All right. Okay. This might get old real quick or ridiculously funny, right?
Gons, you're so smart.
I think this is going to be a lot of fun, actually. Okay, so I want to dive in to the stories that over the weekend. First off, I hope everybody had a good holiday weekend, whether you celebrate Christmas or you think it's the most evil pagan thing in the world. Bottom line, a lot of people celebrated the birth of Jesus, and I'm all for that. I'm always going to be for that. I'm not going to hinder that and be a stumbling block for the truth. But, you know, a lot of things have been going on. It's been a pretty chaotic 2016. This is the final week of 2016, and things aren't slowing down. It's actually probably accelerating, and it always feels like things are getting crazier and crazier. And I'm just going to try to cover a few different stories here, share some opinions, and, you know, maybe see if Basilism has some things to say. But in the meantime, let's start off with this story here. I'm going to cite Chicago Tribune here, 57 shot, 11 fatally over Christmas weekend. And it says here 13 people wounded in shootings Monday morning and afternoon, brought to more than 50. The number of people shot since Christmas weekend began Friday afternoon. 11 of the 57 people shot between about 4:50 p.m. Friday and about the same time Monday died from their wounds. More than a dozen others were listed in serious or critical condition. Now, I know the first thing that people think when there's something like this is, a false flag. In fact, basilism, what do you think this is?
False flag! False flag!
Yeah, it's not really funny, but, just to be clear, a false flag is modernly defined as covert operations that are designed to deceive in such a way that the operations appear as though they are being carried out by entities, groups, or nations other than those actually planned, other than those who actually planned and executed them. So basically, whatever we see happening, the motives behind it are going to be not from the very people carrying out the job, so to speak. And that's kind of what the conspiracy community has been seeing with a lot of these events and shooters and gunmen and, a lot of these stories that are troubling. The Pulse shooting nightclub over the summer, Sandy Hook being a big one. So initially, when you look at this, you don't think that there could be some sort of nefarious activity. But here's how I look at it as a Christian and someone that kind of looks at these fringy subjects and conspiracies and all this. And something I've maintained personally is that the conspiracy is spiritual. It's not simply that there is a group of men, behind closed doors trying to orchestrate every crime or every event or shooting out there. It's more so that there is this spiritual conspiracy. So I'm going to read that idea of a false flag again and just look at it from that perspective of a spiritual reality, that there are entities, intelligent, non-corporal entities that interfere or influence the activities of humanity. So a false flag is described as a covert operations, and certainly non-physical entities would be covert, that are designed to deceive in such a way that the operations appear as though they are being carried out by entities, groups, or nations other than those who actually planned and executed them. The idea of these demons conversing with one another to carry out certain acts or influencing a certain person that they have targeted. The reason why political structures, governments, especially the United States government and the military-industrial complex, the reason why they do things, or seemingly have been reported to do things like targeting individuals, like satanic ritual abuse, all that stuff, is because they are under a spiritual deception. They mimic the deeds of demons and the deeds of watchers, fallen watchers, that have influenced mankind for a long time. But, now we're entering this period where the technology is developing, the knowledge of scientific and materialistic endeavors is increasing. So, there's this level of spiritual realities that if you look at it, you know that all these things that are negative, that are against God, that are antichrist in spirit, you can call it a false flag because the people carrying it out, the violence that's being carried out by people all across the world, what causes that? What drives people to hurt one another? And I would argue that it is the fallen nature, the sin nature that is embedded in our code because we have fallen, because of the curse. But that there is the reversal of that curse. And anyway, that's the kind of stuff that, kicks around in my mind when I look at stories like this, that so many have been wounded. And that's why when people say false flag and they immediately think that the story is fake, that's not where people should go with their thinking when they see stories like this. I do think people actually, I don't know if this particular event, I'm not there. I don't know if real people got shot, but I would imagine people really get hurt. People really die in these situations here. There is a reality to it that, unless you're talking about a Sandy Hook, which the evidence is very shaky, very, very suspect in what really went down there. It's a case-by-case thing in terms of the reality of the event itself and the claims of, a dead group of people or, wounded. Well, mostly dead, because if they're wounded, I guess they can report it later. But, it's not that all this is fake. It's that there is a motive behind it that is not covered and not looked at or known always, publicly. And I argue that the ultimate motive is spiritual in nature, that these things are happening not just because there's this great conspiracy out there. Yes, there is. The reason why even that exists is because, again, we are fallen. There is a sin code, a sin nature that needs to be overcome. And that's the center of our problems. It's a heart issue. It's not a systematic issue. It's not a political issue. But, pray for the people, the victims, whether they, again, we don't know if it's real or not, but God knows, and God knows our heart. And we should be praying for these people, that their friends and family, that they're safe, and that, less of this stuff happens, right? And of course, this is going to get spun to, for gun control. And isn't it interesting that it's in Chicago, right? This is where Obama came from. And it's just interesting that this kind of thing would happen in the final Christmas, right before Obama will supposedly leave office, the final week of the year. This kind of tragedy occurs. But, the tragedy with Obama isn't just on the streets. It's actually in his office as well, because according to Zero Hedge, Obama quietly signs the Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act into law. And it says here, late on Friday, with the U.S. population embracing the upcoming holidays, which, if you know the history of the Federal Reserve, is very similar in nature to what they did. And oblivious of most news emerging from the administration, Obama quietly signed into law the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, which authorizes $611 billion for the military in 2017. What do you think about that, Basilism?
Whoa.
I think I like this. You have something else, Basilism?
My brain itches.
All right, I got a few more of those on the thing here. But anyway, getting back to the story here. So, yeah, it says here that Zero Hedge reported much of the balance of Obama's statement blamed the GOP, and the passage of the NDAA and the funding of the U.S. military was hardly a surprise. The biggest news is that it was buried deep inside the provisions of the Defense Authorizations Act. And of course, this is all about the whole fake news thing. And, a couple other things have been passed. And, there's a really interesting story that I found on the Washington Times titled Obama Circumvents Constitution with Signing Statements After Blasting Bush. Now, this is talking about the same thing that happened here. President Obama said Friday that the annual defense policy bill Congress sent him violated the Constitution, but he signed it anyway. Instead of a veto, Mr. Obama issued a statement saying he would modify the law in its execution so he carries it out the way he thinks meets constitutional muster. Obama promised during the 2008 campaign not to engage in issuing signing statements. He said that kind of behavior was a dark spot on the presidency of George W. Bush. But in the years since, Mr. Obama has become a regular practitioner, issuing more than 20 signing statements purporting to alter the way Congress wrote laws. And wow, this is interesting coming from the Washington Times. And then later at the end here, it's interesting that this article talked about the other two things that Obama had passed recently, to fight this whole fake news thing and the Russian influence. And I actually read that document that was posted. If you go to congress.gov and there's a link there, it just talks about what basically, they plan to do with this. And this is all, again, very Orwellian in nature. It's trying to basically, let me do this. Let me just do this real quick, just to make things, for people that are, because some of this is confusing, right? Like you read the legislation and you're not quite sure what it means. Well, luckily, for our sake, we have people like Issy Lepowski writing for Wired.com, write stories like this that I'll read for you or read parts of it for you. It's titled 2016, The Mainstream Media Melted Down as fake news festered. And, it's got this little trendy, picture showing, one speech bubble eating another person's speech bubble. And here's what it says. Traditional news outlets have endured hardships for a while now. The rise of web publishing and free content started undermining once beloved magazines and newspapers decades ago now. And those left standing are forced to experiment with new business models and sustain the whims of the social media platforms that now hold news organizations' fate in their hands. On one hand, it's like, boo-hoo, I mean, the internet has changed the way people receive information, and, traditional media didn't really jump on the bandwagon right away. Mostly because of the way, they were making money, so it didn't matter. The money wasn't being made so much on the internet. Now, the advertisers are all online, right? Everything is internet-based, click-based, and all that. So, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like whining to me to hear this, or to read this opening paragraph. But let me continue. But this last year in American media has been rougher than most. The election inspired more than the usual amount of tribalism online. The citizens' trust in traditional media fell to an all-time low. Just 32% told Gallup they have a great deal or fair amount of trust in the media. This lack of trust formed the perfect petri dish in which a plague of misinformation could fester and bloom. Now, of course, as pointed out by a lot of people, the irony here is the misinformation that is being presented in these stories, these Wired.com, New York Times, and all these outlets about certain issues, especially about this fake news issue. It is just startling to see, they try to make it sound credible, like, 32%. We quote the Gallup poll because they're credible. And sure, yeah, they're credible. But the interpretation of that data, that this lack of trust was the perfect petri dish in which plague of misinformation could fester and bloom. No, people have been moving away from traditional media for years now, years and years. And things just got ridiculous because of how highly politicized mainstream media was this time around. All the money coming from the, Democratic campaign, which was tied to the Soroses and just that whole web of disgusting globalist whatever that just came to fruition. And of course, people that aren't on board with that see through that garbage are going to jump ship and say, hey, you know what? I don't need to watch Fox News at night to get information about the world now. There are plenty of people, just random people out in the streets reporting it. And sure, yeah, certain times things get misreported, people make mistakes, of course, yes. But the issue here isn't the outlets themselves. The issue here is people, they need to do their own vetting and not rely so much on any sort of media outlet. And that's sort of the point that is missed here. And the arrogance of people that publish articles like this or write articles like this to say that, we are the authority and you must listen to us. And if we don't listen to us, then, then all hell will break loose. Well, no, not really. But I digress here. Let me continue. Along came the fake news stories and hyper-partisan websites that were more than happy to publish unrecognizable hyperbole and all-out lies. Again, the irony being that this article itself is full of hyperbole and lies. The stories didn't have to be true. The public had already lost faith in the fact-checkers. Who are the fact-checkers? Is she saying that Wired.com and those outlets are the fact checkers? I don't know. They just had to confirm a certain subset of people's existing beliefs. And if they did, people would share them. The more people shared them, the more Facebook would reward their publishers by prioritizing them in users' news feeds. By August, one BuzzFeed analysis showed fake news was increasingly outperforming the top stories at 19 major news outlets. It's little wonder then that in this brave new world, a candidate like Donald Trump could become president. I find that really funny that this author would try to, I keep calling her author. I think she's more of a journalist, and I think it's a she, Issie, I-S-S-I-E. I'm just going to assume here that it's a female. If it's not, I apologize for not being politically correct or whatnot. But I just think it's funny that they use the lingo "brave new world" that the Trump can only be elected in this brave new world where, fake news takes over, which is so funny because through the eyes of a lot of people, the exact opposite was what happened. The fake establishment, the totalitarian establishment was completely exposed, not just for their, nefarious activity with Satanism and spirit cooking and pedophilia and all that stuff. Put all that stuff aside, which is bad or enough in itself, right? But, just the blatant bashing, the propaganda, just not making sense, the lies. Hillary Clinton was caught in so many lies, blatant lies, that, people just were turned off. It's not the brave new world system of trying to cover up the truth. That comes way more from, major outlets like, I don't know, maybe Wired.com. Wired.com, co-created by Kevin Kelly, who I've cited his book, What Technology Wants, right? And Wired.com is very pro-technology, very pro-futurist. They champion science and technology. They're very much into the transhumanist train. And, so Wired.com has its bias and they see progress and all this stuff. They're buying into an ideology, a system that, again, I believe will ultimately help usher in all the major prophecies in the Bible. And I think not having to do with anything necessarily specific, although the internet itself, I believe, is going to be a huge, huge thing with the mark of the beast. Obviously it's not a new idea. People have been saying that for as long as the internet's been around, but just the way things are going, the way commerce is being done, of course, Venezuela and India being the two recent nations to see cash being pulled, right? And seeing that everybody is being forced to go digital. And I'm going to cite Zero Hedge again here. I apologize. I'm kind of going in and out of stories and jumping around here. It's a little bit different without a co-host. Just doing this alone, there's a different vibe to it. Although I do have Basilism to cheer me up if I feel dumb or if I feel like I messed something up. Right, Basilism?
Gons, you're so smart.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just wasting time here with this kind of thing, but it's fun. What about this one? I'm just going to press this button to see what Basilism says here.
I wish I was as smart as you, Gons.
Wow, this is it almost sounds like I programmed this thing. So Zero Hedge had this other article they published today. It was called The Big Theme for 2017 Global Cash Bans. And it says here, the big theme for 2017 will be cash, not a pro-deflationary time to own theme, but a let's ban it quickly, or let's ban it as quickly as possible theme. Now, the thing that really jumped out at me, okay, and I don't know, maybe this is just something that, again, is it coincidence? I don't know. But here's what's interesting. If you guys have been following along here, they pulled the cash, right? They basically had a cash crisis in India where they pulled, big bills out of the market. And so, a country that is still mostly operating in cash just had their government just took out the cash, and nothing has happened to the people in power there, the politicians. There is no uprising from the Indian people. They're just kind of like, oh, whatever, yeah, it sucks. I don't know how they're dealing with it, but this is reportedly what's happened. Now, here's the thing that's really bizarre. India is the 7th largest country in the world by GDP. Okay, so, all right, 7. The number 7, we always see number 7. Nothing crazy. But here's the other part that's weird. The other country that just pulled cash, Venezuela. Venezuela is the 33rd largest nation by GDP. So, it's outlined here. Put simply, 2016 was the year, and I'm quoting Zero Hedge, in which the 7th and 33rd largest nations by GDP went effectively cashless, and no one lost their jobs over it. So I think what we might see here is this ban on cash across the world. America's coming. America's in line. Okay, we know it's coming in America. And, I think it's important to not to stock up necessarily. I'm not trying to be a doom and gloom kind of guy. But be smart. I'm not a financial advisor. In fact, I'm pretty poor with finances, I'll be honest. I'm glad I have a brilliant wife who knows how to deal with money much better than I do. That being said, I do think it's not a bad idea to turn some of these paper IOUs, or, the numbers you have in your bank account, these digits, these digital zeros and ones, into hard assets, some sort of precious metal. Again, these are things I'm not very familiar with. I'm not an expert on these things, but they do interest me now, especially now looking at all the things going on, what's happening and trending around the world. I don't think it's a bad idea to start thinking in that sort of context. But the reason why I brought this up was because I was talking about the mark of the beast and the buying and selling, going cashless. A big part of online entrepreneurship in the last decade, maybe more than that, ever since the internet has been around, but really in the last decade, the genre of teaching how to make money and making money doing it, right? There is a lot of podcasts out there. I've listened to a few of them. Obviously, I make a majority of my income online. So I understand, or I try to understand, the internet market and how it works. And I don't know everything. I'm not an expert in terms of, certain sectors or certain niches or whatever. But, I did study some of that in terms of looking at how I can generate some sort of passive income online. And when I read Revelation 13 and it says that all people, right? Rich, poor, free, slave, everybody must have the mark on his forehead or his right hand in order to buy and sell. And again, this is an obvious thing. This is not a new thing. I just think it's an important time to remind everybody what the internet really might lead to. And part of the progress towards that is these stories like fake news and the legislation of Obama trying to control what is quote unquote true, the Ministry of Truth type of thing. I think ultimately you have to have that branding, some sort of mark, whether you stick an Amazon.com sticker on your forehead and your right hand, and otherwise you can't buy or sell on Amazon. If Amazon becomes the global or world system, or, maybe eBay, PayPal. There are companies out there, they're all working in the digital space, and money is moving digitally. I don't have the source, but I know somebody recently in the world of finances and all this stuff said, the death of precious metals. Now we live in the digital age. This is the sentiment of the globalist bankers. And I think this is sort of the thing we're seeing with the stories of, going cashless, pulling the cash in Venezuela, which happens to be the 33rd largest nation of GDP, and India, which happens to be the 7th largest country in the world by GDP. So that is a clear signal, in my opinion, a clear signal from some of these nefarious group folks telling us what they have in store for 2017. So pray up, stay vigilant, be sober-minded. Hope you guys were able to follow along. It was a little choppy, I felt like, without Basil here, although I did have Basilism here to kind of guide me, I guess. Right, Basilism?
You're the best.
I think he's talking to the audience, right? Basil, you're talking to the audience?
You betcha, buddy.
Okay, tell them now.
You're the best.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think that about does it for this episode of Canary Cry News Talk. Again, doing it solo. Little different feel. I get it. I'm sorry. I apologize for all you Basil loyalists. But again, he is off traveling and exploring. Can't keep him in one place for too long. Interesting cat, this Basil. But in any case, I hope you guys have a wonderful New Year's. Be safe. And the next episode will be in 2017. But until then, remember to think outside the cage.
Thanks for listening to Canary Cry News Talk. If you liked what you heard, please share it with others by word of mouth or on your social media. Also, please rate and review on iTunes so iTunes robots will share it with unsuspecting victims. Canary Cry News Talk is supported by you, the listener. If you'd like to support Canary Cry News Talk financially or to learn more, please visit canarycrynewstalk.com.